The night was silent in Vijayapura. Even the dogs had stopped barking. In the small neighborhood of Akamahadevi Nagar, only the hum of crickets broke the stillness. But inside a modest rented house, something sinister was about to unfold. Something that would turn a quiet night into a nightmare that still echoes through Karnataka today. Birappa Pujari, a simple farmer who had moved here with his wife Sunanda and their 2 children, lay asleep after a long day's work. The dim light of the street lamp slipped through the cracks of the old window and fell on his tired face. He had drunk a little that evening, a habit he'd picked up to drown the growing tension between him and his wife. He didn't know that this night would test the limits of his fate. Around midnight, as silence wrapped the town, Birappa suddenly felt something strange. A crushing weight pressed against his chest, stealing the air from his lungs. His eyes flew open. Through the darkness, he saw a blurred figure sitting on him, heavy, motionless, and cold. Panic struck. He tried to move, but another figure rushed toward him and pinned his legs down. Before he could even shout, a rough hand covered his mouth, and fingers like iron wrapped around his throat. He struggled, gasping for air. The more he fought, the tighter the grip became. His heartbeat roared in his ears and pain shot through his chest. The man at his feet pressed hard, so hard that Birappa's body convulsed in agony. He felt as if his soul was being ripped apart. In the haze of pain and fear, a voice echoed. A woman's voice, faint but sharp enough to freeze his blood. "Don't let him go," she hissed. "Press harder. Make sure he never breathes again." The tone was filled with anger and hatred. Birappa's heart stopped for a moment. He knew that voice. It was the voice of someone he loved, someone he trusted, his wife, Sunanda. Allowed him. The world faded into silence. When he opened his eyes again, he wasn't at home. Beeping machines surrounded him and a nurse was standing beside his hospital bed. Pain throbbed through his neck, his ribs, and his chest. The nurse gave him a soft smile and said, "You're safe now. You'll be all right." But Birappa's mind was spinning with confusion and terror. He tried to speak, but his throat burned with pain. Finally, he managed to whisper, "Where is my wife, Sunanda?" The nurse hesitated. Her smile faded. "She's missing," she said quietly. "No one has seen her since that night." Birappa's heart sank. The woman he thought would hold his hand in every struggle had vanished the moment his life nearly ended. Why? The police soon arrived at the hospital and began questioning him. Struggling to find words, Birappa recounted the horror of that night, how 2 men had attacked him while he slept, how they tried to strangle him, and how his wife did nothing to stop them. He even remembered hearing her voice, the same voice that ordered his death. The officers exchanged tense looks. Something didn't add up. Sunanda's sudden disappearance and her husband's chilling account pointed to a darker truth, one that hinted she might have been more than just a silent witness. The police immediately launched a search for her. For days, they combed through the nearby areas, bus stops, train stations, and the homes of relatives. But Sunanda had vanished without a trace. It was as if she had melted into thin air. As Birappa lay in his hospital bed, haunted by memories, one question clawed at his heart. Why would she do this? He replayed every moment of their life together, searching for signs he might have missed. Had there been something in her eyes? Some silence that carried more than just anger? He couldn't find peace. The only thing he knew was that his life would never be the same again. And as police expanded their search, they uncovered something unexpected. A past filled with secrets, betrayal, and forbidden love that had been growing like poison in the shadows of their marriage. A name emerged from the whispers of villagers. a name that would soon expose the real reason behind that deadly night. But who was this man, and how was he connected to Sunanda's hatred? The answer would unravel a web of love, lust, and vengeance so deep, it would shake the entire town to its core. Back in the quiet village of Anjutagi, long before the blood-soaked night of August 31st, life seemed simple. The sun rose over the farmlands, children played barefoot in the mud, and the farmers worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk. Among them was Birappa Pujari, a hard-working yet mild-tempered man who believed his wife Sunanda was his greatest blessing. He never imagined that love could one day turn into a blade aimed straight at his heart. Their life together had always been ordinary. A small house, 2 children, and a few acres of land that Birappa inherited from his ancestors. But fate had a different path carved for them. In the same village lived a young man named Sidapa, whose land bordered Birappa's fields. He was younger, stronger, and charming, the kind of man whose laughter could be heard from afar and whose words carried dangerous warmth. When Sunanda began helping her husband in the fields, her path often crossed with Sidapa's. At first, it was innocent, just brief conversations about crops and weather. But curiosity slowly grew into comfort, and comfort turned into something more dangerous. A stolen glance, a secret smile, and before they realized it, boundaries were crossed. What began as companionship turned into obsession. Sidapa and Sunanda started meeting in hidden corners of the fields, near the tall sugarcane and the lonely banyan tree Uatia. Here no one could see them. Their hearts burned with forbidden passion. The village, however, has no walls thick enough to hide secrets. Whispers started circling, whispers that turned into rumors. Soon, every lane and every tea stall in the village echoed with one story: Sunanda and Sidapa. It didn't take long for those whispers to reach Birappa. When he first heard them, he refused to believe it. He thought it was just gossip born out of jealousy. But when he began noticing Sunanda's unusual behavior, her long absences, her constant restlessness, her late evenings in the fields, doubt began to eat away at him. The man who once trusted blindly now couldn't sleep without suspicion crawling through his veins. The confrontation came one evening. The sun had just disappeared behind the hills when Birappa stormed into the house. "Who is he, Sunanda?" he demanded. She froze, clutching her sari tightly. His voice trembled, a mix of rage and heartbreak, but Sunanda stayed silent. That silence spoke louder than any confession. In that moment, the love between them cracked. From then on, their home turned into a battlefield, full of arguments, tears, and unbearable silence. Birappa begged her to stop meeting Sidapa. He warned her of the shame, the gossip, the ruin it would bring to their family. But Sunanda was already lost in her forbidden love. To her, Sidapa represented freedom. Freedom from Birappa's temper, from his control, from the dullness of her life. She didn't want peace anymore. She wanted escape. Days turned into weeks, and Birappa's anger turned into helplessness. The villagers mocked him behind his back. Wherever he went, he could feel their stares piercing his pride. That humiliation was too heavy to carry. Finally, one morning, Birappa sold his ancestral land, the last connection to his past, and left the village with his family. He moved to Vijayapura's indie town, hoping the city's noise would bury the whispers of betrayal. But some ghosts travel with you. Sunanda's heart was still chained to Sidapa. Even in the new town, her mind wandered back to the fields, to the man who had once touched her hand beneath the blazing sun. She found ways to contact him. Secret phone calls became their new meeting ground. Whenever Birappa left for work, she dialed Sidapa's number and spoke for hours. They laughed, they dreamed, and soon they planned. When Birappa discovered her secret calls, everything shattered again. One night he snatched her phone and the truth hit him like lightning. The same man he had once trusted, the same neighbor he had shared meals with, was still speaking to his wife behind his back. The rage inside him boiled over. The walls shook with their argument. Neighbors later said they could hear screams, anger, pain, and betrayal all tangled in one chaotic storm. The next day, Sunanda went back to her phone, but this time her voice was different. She wasn't crying anymore. She was cold, calculating. She told Sidapa everything, about the fight, about how her husband humiliated her, and about the revenge burning inside her. "He won't stop," she said bitterly. "He'll ruin both our lives." Sidapa's pride, already wounded by Birappa's insults, snapped. "Then we'll end this once and for all," he replied. And from that conversation, a dark plan began to take shape, a plan to erase Birappa from their lives forever. For nights, they discussed it in whispers. They picked the day, the hour, and the signal. Sidapa roped in one of his close friends, a man who would help him finish the job quickly. The idea was simple. Wait until Birappa was deep asleep, then strike. Sunanda would leave the door unlocked. The rest would be silence. On August 31st, 2025, the stage was set. Sunanda cooked dinner as usual, her hands steady though her heart beat fast. She smiled at her husband, serving him food one last time as if nothing was wrong. Later, she watched him drink and slowly drift into slumber. Then she walked quietly to the door, unlatched it halfway, and returned to her bed, her face calm, her heart frozen. Outside, two shadows moved toward the house, silent as death, ready to carry out the plan. But fate, as always, had one final twist waiting in the dark. The clock struck midnight. The air inside the small house was thick, not just with heat, but with tension that felt almost alive. The last light flickered out, and only the sound of the ceiling fan broke the silence. On the bed lay Birappa, deep in sleep, unaware that death had already entered his home. The door, left slightly open, creaked gently as two shadows slipped through. One carried a knife, the other a length of rope. The two men moved like ghosts, their footsteps barely touching the ground. Sunanda sat at the corner of the bed, her eyes cold, her breathing steady. When Sidapa looked at her, she gave a slow nod. The signal. Within seconds, the nightmare began. They pounced on Birappa, pressing him down, choking him, crushing him beneath their weight. But Birappa wasn't an easy target. Even half drunk, he fought back with desperate strength. He kicked, he clawed, and in that struggle for life, his legs struck the edge of the metal fridge. The crash shattered the stillness of the night. A neighbor stirred, then another. The attackers froze for a second, and that hesitation was enough. The noise grew louder as people woke up, confused and frightened. Sidapa panicked. "We have to go," he hissed. He and his friend bolted out through the door, vanishing into the darkness. By the time neighbors burst into the room, the scene was chaos. Birappa lay on the floor gasping, his body bruised and trembling, and there, sitting beside him, was Sunanda, calm, almost expressionless. When people asked what happened, she said in a trembling voice, "Thieves. They broke in. They attacked him." The neighbors believed her. They rushed Birappa to the hospital, never suspecting that the real thief of his life sat right beside them. But truth has its own way of speaking. When Birappa regained consciousness, his voice came out weak but clear, and it carried a revelation that froze everyone in shock. "It wasn't thieves," he said, trembling. "It was my wife. She let them in. I saw her. I heard her voice telling them to kill me." The officers who heard this could barely believe it. Yet, the missing wife, the strange behavior, the unlocked door, every clue pointed in one direction. The police began their search for Sunanda immediately. They checked every corner of Vijayapura, every bus stop, every hotel, every station, but she was nowhere to be found. For nearly a week, she seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. But a predator can hide only for so long. Eventually, acting on a tip, officers found her hiding in a relative's house on the edge of town. When they brought her to the station, her expression was blank, as if the fear had already died inside her. At first, she denied everything. She cried, she swore she was innocent. But as hours turned into days and the questions grew sharper, her lies began to crumble. Finally, exhausted and cornered, Sunanda broke down. In a trembling voice, she confessed it all: the affair with Sidapa, the shame, the fights, and finally, the plan to kill her husband. "He humiliated me," she said coldly. "I couldn't live with him anymore. Sidapa promised me a new life." The officers listened in silence. What she described next was beyond shocking. How she had planned the attack, how she left the door unlocked, how she watched as they tried to take her husband's life. Every detail matched Birappa's story. The police moved fast. They raided Sidapa's home, but he was gone. For days, they chased leads and followed traces, but the man had vanished into thin air. And then, out of nowhere, a video appeared online. Sidapa himself had uploaded it. The video, barely a few minutes long, spread across social media like wildfire. In it, Sidapa sat against a bare wall, his face hollow, his eyes red. He said he wasn't the monster people thought he was. "I loved her," he said in a trembling voice. "Everything I did because she wanted it. She begged me to kill him. She said we could finally be free, but now she's turned on me. She's blaming me for everything." As the video went on, his tone shifted from anger to despair. He admitted helping Sunanda plan the attack, but claimed she was the true mastermind. "She used me," he said, "and now there's no way out." His last words were chilling. "By the time you see this video, I'll be gone. But remember, she's the real reason for all of this." 10 days later, the police found his body hanging from a neem tree at the edge of the same village where it all began. The stench led them to it, the final silent confession. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of force. The rope marks on his neck told the rest of the story. Sidapa had ended his life, trapped between love, guilt, and betrayal. The police closed the case with heavy hearts. Sunanda was charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. Her calmness during interrogation chilled even the toughest officers. When asked if she regretted anything, she simply said, "I only regret trusting the wrong man." Her words echoed through the room like a venom. Meanwhile, Birappa, though alive, was broken, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He had survived death, but he couldn't survive betrayal. The woman he had built his life with, the mother of his children, had tried to destroy him, and in doing so, she destroyed everything: their home, their children's future, and 3 lives that could never be whole again. Today, the house in Akka Mahadevi Nagar still stands, silent, empty, and haunted by whispers of that night. The neighbors say that sometimes when the wind is still, they can hear faint cries, the sound of a man struggling to breathe, the echo of a love that turned into a curse. The story of Birappa, Sunanda, and Sidapa is not just about love or betrayal. It's about how desire can twist into destruction, how trust can turn to poison, and how sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't a knife or rope, but a promise whispered in the dark. But tell me this, in the end, who was truly guilty? The woman who plotted the crime, The man who carried it out, or the love that made them both blind?